Yeah. So anyway, so you are able to see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
So now you see. So if you remember, the last class we have discussed about seismological model. Okay. So I hope all of you have downloaded the Fortran codes of Boor, and then you have to practice. Okay, generate some time histories and other things. So this anyway. So we have discussed this in our last class, the empirical, the model itself. Okay, so which you can do for to generate this acceleration, the time histories for a given magnitude, distance, and others. Say, okay, you can do this one. So now so with this you see we will go to the next topic. Okay, so if you see our thing, like the first unit was on introduction to earthquakes I have given. Okay, so then we started discussing about strong motion data. So this I have shown you. Then we have also shown you the ground motion parameters. So what are the interesting parameters we have discussed? Then after that, we discussed about GMPs, ground motion prediction equations, how to fit these type of equations and others. Then after that, we have discussed seismological models. So where you can generate time histories say from this empirically through these models itself. So the next one. So okay. So now so with this you follow, right? One unit almost is over. So now we go towards the most the important thing, that is what you followed. And this course is about, that is on this seismic hazard analysis. Okay. So now our GMP is which we have discussed previously. So like if I give magnitude and if I give distance, say I can find out PGA, response spectra, or whatever parameters as of from GMPs. Okay, so this I can do. So now this we have seen actually. Okay, so now we have to see how to use these things in our design. Okay, so like for example, you see this is my I'm showing you the Gujarat the fault map. So let us say this is Ahmedabad city is located somewhere here actually. Okay, and now my thing is I want to construct a building, or maybe a power plant, or maybe it may be a nuclear reactor, or any buildings, a hospital or anything like that. So I want to construct in Ahmedabad city. Okay, so now generally so now in our engineering design, so what is the main objective of our design? See, whenever steel design, whatever say, what is the main objective of design? See, what is the objective of design?
Satisfies the criteria and serviceability criteria.
Great. Safety, serviceability you followed, like IS 800 if you see, say safety, serviceability they say. But here one most important thing is safety and serviceability say, but in where in the past or in the future?
The future.
Future.
See, you are able to hear now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So now, of course, internet something is going and coming our Wi-Fi. But anyway, so now you see, so the main objective of design is safety, serviceability, and other things. But where safety and serviceability, these criteria should be satisfied in the past or present or future?
Throughout the design life also.
Throughout the design life means, suppose if I am constructing a new building, say I want it to be safe in where?
In the future.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the code, whenever you are designing a building, say, so we want the building to be safe in the future, that is in the design life. Okay, so this future is a very very dangerous word actually. Okay, the future, because what is why future is a very dangerous thing?
Unpredictable.
Unpredictable, uncertain. You see, anything may happen in the future. Actually, okay. So this is the most important challenge for a design engineer, because we want safety, serviceability, whatever code, that is all fine, but we want all these things to happen in the future. So future is a very, very dangerous word, you followed, right? So we ourselves don't know our future, okay, but if you want to decide the building's future, say, it becomes very, very problematic. So now let us say in Ahmedabad I want to construct a building, okay, let us say its a design life is some 50 years kind of a thing. So if the building has to be safe against earthquakes, okay, so we are interested only in earthquake load only, not wind or anything like that, okay. So if I want to make it to be safe in next 50 years, say, so these red lines you are seeing here, these are all the important faults, okay, located around the Ahmedabad city, marginal fault, then Cambay Basin, then you can see Kishangarh Chipri fault is here, many faults are there. Now in the next 50 years, say, so now what may happen, you can have 8 magnitude can come, or 7 magnitude can come, 6 magnitude can come, or even this fault may rupture, this marginal fault which is nearer to Ahmedabad may rupture, or far away also it can occur, this place, or Kutch mainland fault, say. So here earthquake can occur, or island belt fault, or this place, say, near this coast, Saurashtra coast also earthquake can occur. So you can have variety of combinations are possible, and there is also one more chance is that no earthquake may occur also in the next 50 years. So that also is a possibility. So now so for a designer, say, so we as an engineer, we want PGA, you followed, right, response spectra and other things to design my building. So now if you see in the next future 50 years, say, so I can have several combinations are there. So like 8 magnitude earthquake can occur at 10 kilometer distance, or you followed, right, 7 magnitude may occur at 5 kilometer distance, or there no earthquake can occur also, that is also another possibility. So 6 magnitude 30, so like all these several combinations you followed, it comes into picture. The reason why we are getting several combinations is because we are talking about future, which is not in our control. So now so now how do we have, what a designer say, what is that we have to do in design, so if I substitute magnitude, if I substitute distances, say, in my GMP, that is C1 plus C2M plus C3R or something like that, so I can get PGA basically. So I can get PGA like 8 and 10 magnitudes, maybe 1G I will get, 7.5 say some 0.7G I will get, so 630 say some 0.3G I will get. So I will have a set of the design values, so 1G, the 0.7G, you say 0.3G, 0.25, and then maybe 1.2G, like that. I will get several possible design values. So now which design value we have to use in design? So which one you will use, from all these possible combinations? See, you understand the question, right? Which one you will use?
Maximum one.
Generally, as an engineer, you take the maximum. So let us say the maximum value if you take, it turns out to be 1.2G. So now what happens when you want to design for very high PGA values, 1.2G?
Cost of building will be high.
Cost of building will be more, even the the columns, the walls, of course, when the the load is high, then obviously cross sectional area will increase, you follow, right? It becomes uneconomical kind of a thing. Okay, so when you design for large values, say, your building may be safe, but the economy wise you followed it is a useless kind of a thing. Suppose if you design for the lowest value means no earthquake may occur also, that means 0 times G are very, very low values, say. So then it will be perfect, economy may be guaranteed, okay, there, but safety we are compromising. Okay, so safety you may be, you see, the compromising for this the very low values itself. So now, so this is also ruled out, the lowest value is ruled out, the highest value is also ruled out basically because of economy and other reasons. So now among these values, say, okay, so now if you arrange all of them in some kind of a descending order or something like that, like 0.1G ascending order, 0.2G, like this, you see, 0.3G, the maximum is 1.2 times gravity, say. Okay, so the lowest value means, you see, you are unsafe, but it is economy. highest value means you followed it. The things are uneconomical, but safety is guaranteed. So now, so this end is also not good. This end is also not good. Now, how do we take a decision? No. How to take a decision? Which one you will take now?
Mean value.
No, that is one thing.
80% of highest value.
80?
80% of the highest value.
No, not 80% or something. What is the basis? How do you select which value, What is the basis for that 80% or how do we select?
Based on the return period of the event you will design.
Return period, that is fine, okay, but I'm asking as a the olden days. So like you see in olden days what people used to do, or what is the concept you see behind all these things? Say 10-15 years back, say return period and these things was not there. So what people used to do was, like you see, depending on the type of the building. Say like for example, if you have ordinary multi-story building, say what is its lifetime?
50 years.
50 years. No, okay, apartments or something. Then suppose if you are having a hospitals or these type of structures, the lifetime or the safety you followed, right, they used to increase. Suppose if you have nuclear reactors, say the lifetime is something they assume it to be, whether nuclear reactor will be working only for 50 years, but its life is assumed to be something around say 10,000 years or like that. Historical monuments say. So the lifetime is very, very high actually, because we want our culture to go for generations, 5,000 years like that we used to have. So now what people used to do was, among these values, say if you are having a building which has only 50 years, so its design value can be, you can lower the design value. Suppose if you're having a hospital or the monumental building or something, so because we want it for more generations, so they used to select somewhat slightly higher value, like you see one of you pointed out, right, mean value or something like that. So mean value if you take, say, so this may be used for ordinary buildings, but if you're having a the important buildings, what you will do in statistics, you have a mean, we have a standard deviation and other things here. So for ordinary buildings, you take mean value. Now for important building, what you will take? Now what you will do in practice for important buildings, say? Now what you do? Mean?
More than the mean value.
But how much? Infinity is also more than mean.
Mean plus sigma or mean plus 2 sigma.
Excellent. Okay, so for important buildings, you see what people used to do was you take mean plus sigma actually. Okay, so mean plus sigma is what percentile? Any of you remember? So this is, let us say 50 percentile. Mu plus sigma is
95%.
Around 68%.
So not 60, it is around 84 you followed it, percentile kind of a thing. Then we have mu plus 1.65 times sigma you followed. So this is a 95 percentile also we used to take. So in the olden days, or in the generally like in many now also in engineering profession, so when you have learning large data sets, say what one does is, if you're having so many values, mean is the one which everybody prefers. So mean may be fine for ordinary buildings, but m plus sigma, say, so you can take for the important buildings. Then if you want some more important, so like nuclear reactor something, m plus 1.65 times sigma. So like that, you say the design used to proceed actually. Okay, so that was the concept which was existing, and everybody you followed it was using, you see, previously itself. But nowadays, say like for example, if you see one typical this one, say, okay, so like for example, you see, so if you see one simple thing, so like log y, so this is my expression, okay, the attenuation equation, whatever. Now, so I have a log y is equal to, you see, c1 plus c2 m minus 6. So this is a typical GMP. Okay, c3 m minus 6 you see whole square, okay, minus log r minus c4 times r. So this is a typical GMP for peninsular India. You followed it for rock sites, say. So coefficients are also there. C1 is 1.68, then C2 is 0.9241, then C3, say, okay, this is minus 0.076, then C4, that is 0.0057. So these are the coefficients, and sigma, the error in this regression is, you know, 0.4648 or something. So this is my regression equation, say. So now, you know, so like what they do is, suppose if I know the magnitude, okay, so magnitude is 6 and the distance is 10 kilometers, say. Okay, the typical some combination. So substitute in this equation to find out PGA. Okay, so this turns out to be, you know, log y is equal to some number will come, but y is equal to exponent of this one. So finally, so what happens is, you know, so this number, say, so this y, this will be PGA will be, say, 0.5098 G. So this is the you know, the value for combination of 6 and 10. So this is what we call as a mean value, which can be used for ordinary structures. Now, if you want mean plus sigma, say, what you have to do? So mean plus sigma, while that is 84 percentile, say. So what you have to do? So you are having this equation, that is a big equation you have, plus you also add the sigma also. What is sigma? 0.46 you know, the 48 actual. Okay, so you add this also. Now you take the logarithm of this itself, say. What will be this value? What is e to the power of 0.4648? No. So if you can compute, say, okay, so like you see, you can get you know, the PGA. Now, so just we will try to compute this number, how it turns out to be. Now, so if you try to find out, you know, so this number 1. Just 1 second. So log of 5098, say. No, so 37 plus 0.4648. So this turns out to be 81, you see, 8115. You followed G. Now this inside, if you take logarithms, that is log of 0.5098, that means inside it will be 0.6737. Okay, so this, if you take the previous one was log y is minus 0.6737 and y is you know, 0.5098 G. This is the mean value. Okay. Now what we have done is, you know, so if I add one standard deviation to my this one, say, so this turns out to be minus 0.2089, and y, that is exponent of this, if you find out, it turns out to be 0.8115 G. So this is what we call as, you see, the 84 you know, the percentile. Now for this one, say, that is 94 percentile or something, if you do, you know, you add 1.65 times sigma. Okay, that is, you know, so log y, say, so you add 1.65 times sigma minus 0.6737 plus, you see, 1.65 times the sigma. Okay, that is a 0.4648 or something. So I will get y as, you know, so 1.0977 G. Okay, so this is 95 percentile, this is 84 percentile, and this is the mean value. Okay, the 50 percentile or something like that we used to say. So now for ordinary buildings, say, people say that, you see, so this you can take for ordinary. Then for slightly important buildings, say, you take this one. If it is very important, say, you take like this actual. Okay, so this was you know, the statistical you followed, right, the approach which is widely followed in you know, many disciplines now also, 84, 50, you know, the 95 percentile kind of a thing. But the problem here, what here we have is, you know, in our future, say, what is the main problem here? So now this entire problem, so what is that we have done? We have assumed a magnitude as 6 and a distance as a 10 kilometers. So this is one combination basically. Okay, so generally in the olden days, what people used to do was, you know, like this is a fault map of Ahmedabad, say. Okay, so what they used to do is they used to select the closest fault to Ahmedabad. So let us say the marginal fault is very, very close to Ahmedabad, say. So the distance is anyway known. This is distance is a fixed kind of a thing. So then they used to fix the magnitude, like, you see, some intuitive kind of a thing they used to use, like one magnitude they used to assume, and then, you know, from the GMP, say, because you have uncertainty in the GMP, mean m plus sigma, m plus 1.65 times sigma, m plus 2 sigma, like that they used to compute, and then, you see, they used to do the design. So this was the older things, and you know, the widely, and this principle say. So we call as you see the deterministic seismic hazard analysis also. Okay, so like you see, you assume a single scenario. Okay, like you select a magnitude, then you select a distance, and then you whatever you do this one, and then you see you compute mu plus sigma, like you followed, right? 1.65 times sigma or whatever you see, 2 sigma, like that. You see, you select a design value and then you use it here. So here this is what generally is known as a deterministic seismic hazard analysis. So here the uncertainties things in the GMP is considered. Okay, so the uncertainty in the ground motion equations actually. Okay, this is considered in the analysis. So this is the older you followed, right? The concept, and now also people are using this this HA itself. But the problem what happens is this is only for one combination. But in reality, in the next 50 years, you say how many combinations are possible? Do you have only one combination?
Infinite.
Yeah, many are there. See, like 6 and 10, so you can have 7, 15, like this fault maker, like this also. So what? So the philosophy is, so basically what happening is so you, although this equation is fine and it has uncertainty, so the problem is the inputs basically. In reality, the inputs, that is the magnitude and then the distance. So these are all random variables. You followed, right? They are all random quantities because of future. You followed, right? These are all random variables. So generally, when you are having if the inputs are random, say what will be the output? Now what will be the output if inputs m is also random, distance is also random, say, so the output is also random only. You followed, right? The random variables will be there. So people you followed it as slowly, so this is a DSHA concept to say, slowly you follow now. Also people are using, but it has somehow, because it is based only on one single combination, and then you do mean m plus sigma, m plus this kind of a combination. So it was not, so there were issues and there were some problems actually, okay, to do it in the practice. So now that what is now the trend, okay, that is in the last 10 to 15 years. So this trend has emerged. The thing is, like if you for all possible combinations, as already I told you, you are having several PGS, like you see 1.2G, 1.1G, you see 1.0G, 0.9, so 0.7, like this. You have several combinations of PGS. Say. So now what we are saying is, if you design for the highest, uneconomical design kind of a thing, the lowest is unsafe actually. Okay, now how do we take these values? So previously that as already I told you, that is one thing which is widely used. Now another thing is, suppose if I am designing for the highest value, say, what is your safety level? If I'm designing for the highest value, what is the safety?
100%.
100%. That means your safety is perfectly one. Now if I'm designing for 1.1G, say, what is the safety level? 100% safe for you?
Oh, sir.
So slightly something less actually, maybe 90% or 95%, something maybe. Suppose if I'm designing for 0.9G, say, so my safety has decreased or my risk has increased. So if I design for the highest PGA value, say, my risk is 0 actually, okay. But so risk is basically 0 for the highest value, but for the lowest values, the risk anyway is 100% risk actually, basically, okay. So for any value, if I choose below this this one, I will have some amount of risk, like you say 98% risk, you see, like you followed a 90, 2%, this is 0. So 1% risk, 2% risk, 3% risk, you followed at 4%, like that, you see, I will have, and for last value anyway will be the 100% risk itself. So if I am not designing for the maximum value, that means, I am risking something. So I am, there is a risk associated with all these numbers itself. Now the concept has come now, how this is the problem is same as like in our lives also. So like all of right, maybe I don't know about you, but your parents and other things, how do we cover risk in our lives? So we all know that, right? There is amount of risk when you are walking on the road or when you are going, you followed, right? There is a risk associated with our lives. So what is the concept we use now? How do you handle this risk in our lives? Insurance policies we take. I hope all of it, because of Corona, COVID insurance also you followed, right? So like you see, the insurance concept has come into picture actually. So the concept is, if you are not designing for the highest value, definitely you are taking some risk. So the concept is you cover the risk by insurance. You followed, right? So this is how we do. And now in our insurance people, so what do they do? Insurance people, let us say, a 60-year-old man, then 30-year-old man, then some 5 years kid actually. Okay, so all of them go to, they take insurance policy for 1 crore. Say, what does the insurance company does? See, all three people, they are gone for insuring themselves. They have insured them for 1 crore. What insurance company will do?
They will charge high price for 60-year-old.
Why they charge high premium for 60-year-old fellow?
The risk is high.
His risk level is high. Okay, so maybe his premium maybe 1 lakh per year, say. So this fellow maybe is 50,000, and this fellow maybe you followed, right, some 20,000 or 10,000, like this. You see the premium, you see they charge actually the companies. So this is a concept. So now this concept has entered even our buildings also. So nowadays I don't know how many of you know, like if you want to buy an apartment in Chennai or any city, Hyderabad or anywhere, so we take bank loans. All of you, I think some of your parents would have bought, or I don't know, bank loan we take. So now what banks are asking nowadays? Any of you have an idea? See, banks, what they will do, see, suppose you have taken a bank loan, say like 1 crore apartment you have bought, bank will give, I think 80 to 90% of the amount. 80 lakhs bank will give you, so 20 lakhs you pay from the pocket. You do registration, and the registration will be named that mortgage something, you see, we try to do it itself. Okay, so once you clear the loan, they will give you all the papers nowadays. So what the banks are demanding, suppose you have taken the bank loan, 80 lakhs bank loan, next day the building collapses, what you will do? So you have taken a bank loan and then building has collapsed actually due to earthquake or some problem, say. So who will be at loss?
Bank or the people.
Yeah, see, banks have lost 80 lakhs. You would have spent little. So what you will do is, you will lift your hands up and say that bank, you will not pay the loan. So the bank will take over your property itself. But what bank will do? The building has been collapsed. So banks are at huge losses actually. So now nowadays what banks are asking, like State Bank of India, any banks, I myself have, done this one. So what banks are doing is, so it is a mandatory. If you want to take a bank loan, say, you have to insure the building. You followed. Without insurance, the banks are not processing even loans also. So these insurance companies are there, okay, where they insure the building. Suppose if the building collapses, say, so the bank, the whole money will be paid by the insurance company to the bank itself. So this concept has entered our design also, and essentially in earthquake engineering, say, so this insurance plays a major role. Many companies, I have no idea like how many of are not, like risk management solutions, Taru consultants, applied insurance research. There are many companies are there. Their job is to provide the risk estimates. Once they give the risk estimates, say, these insurance companies, they take those, they are their clients. Okay, they take these numbers and they decide the premium, how much premium, they have to charge or something like. So now I am paying for my house, you see, some 600 rupees or something per month, it gets deducted from our account itself. So this is a concept. So insurance companies also, so the concept of design nowadays has been changed. So what the concept of design is, don't design for the highest value, don't design for the lowest value, and you take any value in between. Say, you can choose any value whatever you like, but if you are taking any value less than the highest value, definitely you are taking some amount of risk actually. So now what you do is you cover the risk with insurance. So this is the concept. So like for example, say, like one person, say, he designs in Chennai, he designs for 0.7 times G, that is his, the input PGA. One more person, he designs for 0.1 G in Chennai at the same place next to building itself. Now both these people, say, they go to insurance company and they insure their building for 1 crore. Say, what insurance company will do? Whose premium will be high?
0.1 G.
0.1 G.
because this fellow's risk level is very high, so his premium will be maybe 50. This fellow's premium maybe you see some 30,000 or 20, something like that. Okay, so this is a concept. So now so nowadays so what the most important thing is so you can design whatever value you like, but you cover the risk with insurance. So that is a concept. So this is what I mean to say itself. Okay, so this is what you see nowadays the trend. Okay, that is what they call as seismic hazard curves. So this I'm showing for Bombay City. So of course you forget about this A, B, C, D. These are for the soil conditions I'm showing you here. Suppose if you take any curve, say like this dark line, that is a B type site or whatever here. Now what is the design value for Bombay City? Now see here x-axis, what is the design value? IS code gives only one number, but if from the seismic hazard analysis say what is the design value for Bombay City? It lies from
0 to 0.8.
You can design for any value. Okay, so you can design for 0. You can design for 0.8. You can we have plotted only up to 0.8. You can even plot up to whatever value you like. But what is the most important thing is, say like for example, if you design for 0, say what is the risk on the y-axis? You have the risk levels actually. Okay, risk means rate of exceedance. We say when something is exceeding, say, then only you will have a failure. So this anyway is a risk level or rate of exceedance. We say now if you are designing for 0, say what is the risk level? What is the risk level? 10 to the power of 0. What is the 10 to the power of 0?
1.
Almost 100% risk actually. Now let us have designed for 0.2G. You followed it some approximately here. For 0.2G, what is the risk level?
0.1%.
That is a 10 to the power of -3. Suppose some other fellow he designs for 0.8G. Say for 0.8G fellow, what is the risk level?
10 power -5.
10 to the power of -5. So 0.4 also you can find out for all these values actually. Okay, how much is the risk levels? So like somebody designs for 0.8. Somebody designs for 0.1, 0.2 say. So the insurance company you followed, right? You know your risk level. So the insurance company, it comes into picture. You insure the building, and then other process continues itself actually. Okay. So these type of curves we call as the seismic hazard curve. So the seismic hazard curve is essentially your x-axis will be your design value. Okay, it may be response spectra also we can plot. I have just showing you for PGA, but you can plot. So the design value is on the x-axis, and on the y-axis say you have the risk level. Of course, we don't call as a risk. We call it as the rate of exceedance or whatever. But anyway, that itself tells you the risk level. So this is what is required nowadays, the modern design. Okay, so the older method was deterministic analysis, like you simply dump something, take mean value, mean plus sigma, that is a older concept. So this is what is the seismic hazard curve. This is what the designers want, or the insurance companies are nowadays that is the thing. So now what's the advantage when you compare to IS code, say for what is like IS code, if it is in zone 4 or zone 5, zone 5 or something, they give the design value as 0.36G, 0.24G, you see 0.16 and 0.1G, like that. You see the current IS code gives you. Now if you design as per IS code, say how much risk you are taking, the code provides you the risk level.
No, sir.
Now, so if you ask the questions, are you safe if you design as per IS code?
We don't know.
You don't know, you followed it. It is very tough actually. Essential IS 1893, because you don't know what risk you are taking. Okay, so the seismic hazard curve, the advantage is you followed it. You know the risk, how much risk you are taking. Can anybody tell me among all our codes, say essentially regarding the loads, one code tells you the risk level. Which code? For which force, dead load, live load, wind load, earthquake load, snow load, temperature, all kinds of things are there. One code book, it tells you the risk level also. Do you know for which one they tell the risk level? Wind load, what is the risk?
It's calculated for 50-year return period.
50-year return period. Anyway, reciprocal of 50-year is nothing but you see the time period risk level. So the wind load gives you, if you design for that wind zone maps, how much risk you are taking, wind code gives. No, all other codes are not giving. But if you see international earthquake codes, IBC and others, they clearly specify the risk actually. Like 2% risk is allowed. Like the IBC, UBC was there. uniform building code. You see 10% risk like that. You see people used to do this one. So this is the essence of, you see, the seismic hazard analysis actual. Okay, that is what we call as, you know, probabilistic seismic hazard analysis. So the concept is, you know, we assume all scenarios. Okay, because the magnitude, then the distance is say they are all random variables. Okay, so we do a strict analysis. So you assume all of them are, you know, the random variables kind of a thing. So we consider all possible magnitudes, consider all possible distance, all kinds of effects, and then finally come up with this type of a curve where you have the design value and y-axis is your you know, the risk or mean annual rate of accident. So this is the concept what you know that nowadays the modern design say the probabilistic seismic hazard analysis is what we essentially do actually. Okay, so now let us see this probabilistic you followed, right, the analysis. But before going to this probabilistic analysis, okay, so you should know some little bit about you know, this what you can say the probability theory. Okay, I don't know how many of you have done the probability course. All of you have done the probability course?
No, no, sir.
Some of you may have done. Anyway, just briefly I will mention. I will just discuss only whatever is required for our analysis. Okay, so just we'll do briefly this one. So now probability theory you followed it. It's very simple only. I think right now the course is also going on. I think Meher Prasad or somebody is teaching that course. Okay, so the probability analysis, okay, probabilistic theory. And now what is the definition of probability? See how many definitions are there for probability? See, what can you define probability?
Number of favorable outcomes by total number of outcomes.
So there are many definitions. Okay, one is, you know, relative frequency definition, classical definition, you know. So the classical approach, then relative frequency approach, you know, so many are there. Like this is the one which is widely used. You would have studied in your 10th or 12th class. Like you see, if I have a head that coin tossing problem, say, you know, tossing a coin. So what to do is, you know, among head and tails, okay, two are there. What is the probability of getting head is, you see, 1/2, 1/2 like that we do. That is a classical definition. Then we have relative frequency. So this comes from the experiments. Like you do 10 times, you toss a coin, say. In 10 times, you know, if we get head 2 times only, say. So you write the probability as, you see, 2/10. So something like that. And finally, the mathematical way of writing probability is this axiomatic definition. Okay, so this is a definition which is the one which you have to use for probability theory. Okay, the axiomatic definition we say. So this is a mathematical definition. So this definition of probability starts with the first thing is you have to collect a sample space. You followed. So these you have to collect the sample space. So sample space is defined as, you know, collection of, you see, all possible events. So this we call as, you see, the sample space. Now once you have got the sample space, the next thing is you have to do the event space also. Okay, it is defined this symbol B, and this is nothing but collection of all possible subsets. Okay, so this is you followed it, the next step. So now once you have formed the sample space, then once you have like for example, say for a tossing a coin, say what is the sample space for tossing a coin?
Head and T.
H and T. Okay, head and T. And now what is its event space? How many subsets are possible? See, head is a, you know, it is also a subset of the sample space. Tail is there, and sample space is also a subset of you know, this itself. Okay, then you have another, what is the other one?
Empty. C.
Yeah, what is the other
Null
one?
set.
You know, right? Null set actually. Okay. So null set also will be there. Okay, so this is the you know, the possible you followed, right? For coin tossing a coin, say you have, this is the event space. Like for die throwing problem, say what is the sample space?
1 to 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 actually. And what is the event space? So you have so many 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will be there. Then you can have 1 comma 2 you followed it, 2 comma 3, you know, all possible combinations will be there actually. Okay, and if there are, you know, right, if there are n elements say in the sample space, if there are n outcomes are there, the number of possible subsets is how many are possible?
2 power n.
2 to the power of n. See, like for example, coin problem, so you had n is equal to 2, so 2 square is 4, so you followed, so 4 things are possible. For die throwing problems, how many subsets are possible? 2 to the power of 6 itself. Okay, so now, so you have the sample space, then you have an event space, and now the third one say, so now you have to assign probabilities, okay, to all events, you know, in event space, okay, such that, so this definition says like this. The first one is, you know, the probabilities of any event, it should be greater than or equal to 0. So this is the first axiom. Okay, the second axiom is the probability of the sample space, say it should be 1, and the third axiom say is the probability of A union B. So this should be equal to, this is probability of A plus probability of B minus is a probability of A intersection B. So these are what we call as the fundamental axioms of probability. What is the first axiom? What does it tells you? So probability of any event should be always greater than or equal to 0. What does it tells you?
It is non-negative.
It is
Non-negative.
Non-negative. Excellent. Okay. So probability can never be negative. You followed, right? Always probability is positive. Now what is this constraint? Probability of sample space is 1. That means
Maximum value is 1.
maximum value is 1 actual. Okay, that's what the thing. So, you know, maximum value. And the last one anyway is a standard property. So if you want to find out for 2 events, say, so you have to add both of them and then you have to subtract whatever is common between those things also. Okay, so this is what we call as axiomatic definition of probability, or sometimes in measure theory also. This is also the probability is nothing but a measure. Okay, is a measure kind of a thing. So it is something like, you see, how do we define length, area, volume kind of a thing. See, length also, can length be negative?
Yes.
Area, volume, you know, these are all measures you followed, right? So these things cannot be, you know, negative length or negative area. We will never get actually. So these are all, they are defined as measure. So probability is also measure. It can be never be, you know, negative things are not possible. But only thing, the difference between length, area, volume, and probability is the what is the maximum length possible?
Infinite.
Infinite. But probability, you know, the maximum possible probability is 1. So this is the, you followed, right? The one, you know, which we are restricting actually, probability theory itself. So the maximum. So the probability, what you say is, so you have a sample space, you have an event space. Now to all these event space, you assign probability. You can assign any probability you want, 0.2, 0.3, or, you know, you can assign 1 by root 2, 1 by root 3, whatever you have. It should satisfy these 3 constraints actually. Okay, non-negative, normalization, and then this last you followed, right? The property of adding 2, 3 events itself. Okay, that is how the probability is defined. So somebody asks you, can you define probability? So you should give this definition, the axiomatic definition of probability, like you see, sample space, event space, then P, that is a probability you have to assign such that these things are satisfied. These are the definition of probability. Now we also have what we call as a conditional probability also. This is a very important, you know, the concept. Now what is a conditional probability? So this is also probability only. But with respect to, you know, restricted sample space. You followed. So you are restricting the sample space to this one. Say like for die throwing problem, say, what is the sample space for a dice throwing problem? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now if I say the probability of getting 2 and my sample space is only even, then what happens to my sample space?
2, 4, 6.
2, 4, 6, only 3, 4, 6. So now you see I'm asking the question, what is the probability of getting 2 in original sample space? That is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is the original. That is the original probability. Now the conditional probability is, I am asking the same question, probability of getting 2 only, but my sample space is even. So I am restricting my sample space. So this we call as the conditional probability. Okay, so that is defined as probability of E1 given E2. Okay, so this is probability, and it is defined also like this: E1 intersection E2 by probability of the E2 itself, we can write, or you can also write this as a probability of E1 intersection E2 in the original sample space, and probability of E2 in the original sample space. You followed, right? So like that, you see, we try to write these numbers also. So everything is conditional only. But if it is the original sample space, if we don't write as a conditional thing, so like that, you see, we try to do this one. Now suppose if E1 and E2 are independent, say. So now what happens? Now what happens to the probability? So they are independent. So E1 doesn't depend on E2 itself. Now how do you write this probability?
Probability of E1.
See, P of E1 given E2, E1, E2 are entirely different things itself. So what happens? So whether probability of E1 will change if they are independent?
No, sir.
So this is same as P of E1 itself, or which if you want to write this in terms of this one, it is a P of E1 multiplied by P of E2 multiplied by P of E2. Okay, so that means your probability of E1 intersection E2 is nothing but this expression. So we write, you followed, right, is as P of E1 multiplied by P of you followed, right, E2 kind of a thing itself. So then we call them as the independent event itself. Now suppose if P1 E1 intersection E2 say is a null set, what do we call this? If it is a null set, say, suppose intersection E2 is a P of E1 multiplied by P of E2, it is independent. Okay. Now if it is null set, what do you call in probability theory? There is no intersection at all.
Mutually exclusive.
You call as mutually exclusive. So you have to be very careful, okay, when you are defining these, the events itself. So this is a conditional probability. Now we define the most important thing, that is a total probability theorem. This is the most important thing, fundamental, okay, for all the seismic hazard analysis. So if you are having A1, A2, A3 up to some AN, say, and these are all mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, actually. Exhaustive. So that means, what do you mean by mutually exclusive? So there is no intersection. So if this is my sample space, I have events like this. So A1, A2, A3, you follow, right? So like this, I am having several events like this. So this is my A1, A2, A3, A4, like that, you see AN. So what is the intersection of A1 intersection A2, A2 intersection A3? There is nothing common among them. So that is means, they are all mutually, you see, exclusive. Now collectively exhaustive, say, the meaning of this collectively exhaustive is, if I add all these things, say, that is A1 union A2, A1 union, you followed, right, all these things, I should get back the sample space. So this is the meaning of, you see, the collectively, the exhaustive kind of a thing. Okay, so now we are having a mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, like the basis functions or something like that. Now I want to find out probability of some event B. Okay, so this I want to find out. So A1, A2, A3, these are all the building blocks basically, which build your sample space. Now I want to find out probability of some event B, say, which overlaps all these things. Okay, so this is my event B. So this is the event B. Okay, now this I am interested, say. So now if I want to find out probability of occurrence of B, say, how do you find out this one? So what do we do? So like you can see this portion. What is this portion? This area is nothing but
Probability
so
of
this,
B given A1.
no, that is no, this is the intersection between B and A1, right? This area. What is this area?
B intersection A2.
B intersection A2. You followed. So plus B intersection A3. So like this, we have you followed it. B intersection, you see AI. Okay. So like this you have to add, or this I can write as a B intersection AI. Say in terms of conditional probability, I can write B given A1, probability of A1. This comes from the this conditional probability expression. So P of E1 intersection E2 you can write as P of E1 given A2 multiplied by these two terms itself. Okay, so you can also write like this plus so P of B given A2, P of A2. Okay, so like you see plus P of B given AI multiplied by P of EI. So or this you can write as sigma, say I is equal to 1 to n. So P of B given AI multiplied by you see P of the AI. So this is how you see we write this total probability theorem actually. So what this total probability theorem tells us is, so if I have several events, A1, A2, A3, A4 like this, now if I want to find out probability of any event B, say, so I will add the individual contribution actually from these basis functions. I sum up, I will get my total, this itself. So like for example, I will give you like, probability of, occurring a strong earthquake, say, okay. Just some small classification. The probability of a strong earthquake, that means some 8 magnitude or something, is a 0.1, and probability of getting medium earthquake, say, okay, is 0.1, and probability of weak earthquake, okay, is some 0.89 or something like that we have. Okay, now we also know that probability of my structure collapse for a strong earthquake. This also from the damage data I can estimate 0.9. Now probability of collapse, say, for medium earthquakes, okay, this is a 0.2. Then we have the probability of the collapse for a weak earthquake, okay, is some 0.01. So these are the numbers actual. Okay, so now you have a structure. It can collapse due to strong earthquake, it can collapse due to medium, and it can collapse due to weak also. And then these earthquakes are also uncertain actual. Okay, and if earthquake occurs also, the structure collapse also, we have a probability. So now if I want to find out the probability of collapse, the overall collapse of the structure, what you have to do? So probability of collapse.
0.1 into 0.9 plus
0.9. So what is the, so here essentially what we are talking about is, so I have a three things are there. One is a strong A1, A2, A3 are there. Okay, so now among A1, A2, A3, say, so now I know the how much the collapse due to A1, collapse due to A2, collapse due to A3 I have already calculated. Now if I want the overall collapse of my structures, I will use this total probability theorem actually. Okay, so you can use this 0.1 into 0.9 you followed, right? So you add all those three contributions, you will get total collapse also. Same thing we will do in hazard analysis also. Okay, now in our hazard analysis, as already I told you, we have M and R combinations basically. Okay, so we have, if you try to draw, say, so you have a table like this. So I have the events are like this. Okay, so magnitude, distance, and others, so we have our sample space is like this. So 6 magnitude 10 kilometer, 7 magnitude 10 kilometer, 8 magnitude 10 kilometer, then 6 20, 7 20, 8 20, like this. I have my all the individual earthquakes actual. Now I want to find out the probability of getting 0.1 times gravity, say. Okay, so now 6 magnitude 10 that also can produce 0.1 g. 8 magnitude 10 also can produce 0.1 g. So you can have several combinations. So finally I will be calculating you followed, right, the this event B, that is the probability of getting 0.1 g for all these given the numbers itself. For given 6 magnitude 10 kilometer, what is the probability of getting 0.1 g? So it is essentially this total probability theorem itself. Okay, so now this we will be using. Then another most important thing we use is this Bayes theorem also. What is Bayes theorem? Any of you remember? Which is, it is linked to probability theory, total probability theorem itself. So any of you had an idea about Bayes theorem? See, Bayes theorem is what we call as an inverse of total probability theorem. So here what we do is, see, in the total probability theorem, we have been given A1, A2, A3, A4, all these events. Now you are calculating probability of event B. So this you are calculating from the total probability theorem. Now this Bayes theorem is inverse actually. So here what we do is, the event B has occurred. You followed it. The event B has occurred. Now we would like to find out what is the contribution of these individual, the mutually exclusive events itself. So given that B has already occurred, say, what is the probability that you see it has most come from A1, A2, A3, like that. You see, we try to do this one. So this you can write as, probability of B given AJ, P of AJ divided by, you see, P of B. Or you can also write in this format. So P of B given AJ, say, and P of the AJ by, you see, P of B anyway comes from the total probability theorem. I is equal to 1 to AN, B given AN, sorry, B given AI multiplied by, say, probability of AI. So this is our Bayes theorem also. It is something like, given, let us say, the structure has collapsed actually. So now event has already occurred. So the structure has already collapsed. Now we are asking the question that, you see, what is the probability that it has been collapsed due to strong earthquake, or, the medium earthquake or weak earthquake. So this is like inverse kind of a, the problem itself. So this is also very important, which we use in our hazard analysis for de-aggregation. Okay, when we do this de-aggregation, we use these two theorems itself. So these are the very most, the fundamental things which are required for our, the seismic hazard. Total probability theorem, Bayes theorem. So all of you followed it. You open any book or Wikipedia or any Google. So you please study these things in great detail also. Okay. And now another thing what we do in probability theory, that is the concept of, is the random variable also we use. Now, what do you mean by random variable? Can you define random variable? Define random variable. You would have heard it, right? This word. Can any of you define random variable? What do you mean by random variable?
Whose value depend on random event or something like that.
So random event, that is how random variable is defined. What is the exact definition of random variable? See, the name itself is wrong. Random variable, the name says, generally people think random means it can take any value or something like that, but random variable definition is not that one. Okay, so we use in, so it is basically, it is a transformation, it is a mapping. It is a transformation, you see, from sample space to real line. So this is a definition of random variable. You followed? So random variable is anyway, it's just a mapping. So like sample space is here, say. So you are mapping everything to real line actually. So this is how you see the random variable is defined. Why do we require random variable in probability theory? See, total probability theorem, Bayes theorem, that is more or less sufficient to solve all our problems. But why do we use random variable? Have anybody idea? Why do we do this transformation? Now, why do we do this transformation using probability theory? Why do we require this concept of random variable at all? Now, the reason is, suppose if I ask you this question, say, like tossing a coin I have, throwing a die I have, another problem, then compressive strength of concrete, and then P ground acceleration or whatever we are having, which has a high uncertainty among all these things, which is more uncertain. Tossing a coin has more uncertainty, or throwing a dice has more uncertainty, or arrival time of a bus has more uncertainty, or compressive strength of a concrete has more uncertainty, or earthquakes have more uncertainty. How do you answer this question? Which has more high uncertainty? How do you answer these type of questions? Can you answer this?
No, sir.
How do you answer? So why you cannot answer this? If you want to answer, so what is that you have to do? See, what is the sample space for tossing a coin?
Head and tail.
So how many are there in the sample space?
2.
And these are not even head and tails are the numbers.
No, sir.
They are not even a number. They are some alphabets or something you have. Now, if you are having a die throwing problem, so what is that sample space?
6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these are all like, you see, the integers are some numbers, but 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 you don't have. Suppose compressive strength of concrete, say, what is the sample space for compressive strength of concrete? Sample space, what is the compressive strength of concrete?
0 to infinity.
0 to infinity, and you can have compressive strength 23.22. It is like a continuous random variable kind of a thing you have. But if you take a die throwing problem, say, it is like a discrete kind of a thing. And if it is a coin tossing, say, it is not even a number, some alphabets are there. Now, can I compare all these three? I cannot compare. You followed it, because their sample spaces are different. Some of them are not even numbers, and some of them are integers, some of them are decimals. You followed, right? And earthquake magnitude, say, it can go from 0 to infinity magnitude. PGA means 0 to 100 G or something may be there. Now there may be some other variables or some other quantities, they may have negative values also. So now if I want to compare all these things, say, what is the first thing you have to do? If I want to compare this with compressive strength of concrete with all other variables, say, well, how, if you want to compare, the first thing what you have to do, you have to bring them, all of them, to
Same platform.
same platform. That is the same, the sample space has to be same actual. If you can do that, then you can compare. And what is the greatest advantage? When you can pull all of them to the real line, say. So real line means you can do integration, you can do differentiation, you can do all mathematical operations can be done. You follow, right, with this itself. So that is why we require the concept of random variable actually. So the random variable job is, what it does, it is not random. Okay, it just transforms your sample space to real line. That is the beauty of the random variable. Okay, so like coin tossing problem, say. Okay, so we define a random variable like this. So coin tossing is a very the problematic thing, because sample space are not numbers. It is a head tail kind of thing itself. Okay, so now we do a random variable. Okay, from this one. So we do like this. Okay, so that is so we have a head and tail. So what we do is the head I will map to 0, tail I will map to 1 actual. So this is my transformation. I can do head to 2, tail to 4 also. Anything we can do actual. Okay, so this is a we have defined as a head is a 0, tail means 1. The advantage is like this. Okay, now it has been transformed to the real line. Okay, so now if I define like this, x less than or equal to -1, what is in the sample space? Head is been mapped to 0, tail has been mapped to 1. When x is less than or equal to -1, say, what is the value you are having? What is the equivalent to sample space? Now in the sample space, now I am asking, my random variable is less than or equal to -1. What is its analog in the sample space? See, everything starts from where? In the real line, everything starts from
0.
Head has been mapped to 0, tail. So everything starts with 0. So now when I am asking less than -1, say, there is nothing in the sample space, which means it is a null set actually. You followed. So now when x is less than or equal to 0, now what is in the sample space less than or equal to 0? Tell me what is in the sample space?
Head.
Head is there actually. You follow. Now x less than or equal to 0.5. What is there?
Head.
Head only. You followed, right? And now when x is 1, what is the value?
Head and tail.
Head and that is nothing but sample space only. When x is less than or equal to 2, 2.5 or whatever. So what is the value?
Sample space.
Sample space only. So now 2.5, 2.3, 2.5 up to infinity also. So it is sample space itself. You followed it. Now you can see the advantage. So now once everything has been transformed to real lines, you can do all operations. So 2.5 also I can find out. 3.5 also I can find out. Everything I can do. So now if I try to find out the probability also, say that is x less than or equal to x. What is the probability of getting null set? Now what is the probability of getting null set? Now in probability theory, null set probability is how much? It is
0.
0. What is the probability of getting head?
1/2.
Half. X less than 0.5. Still it is head only. So it is still 1/2. X less than or equal to 1?
1.
It is sample space only. What is the probability of getting sample space?
1.
1. So x less than or equal to 2 is also 1. Infinity is also 1 itself. You followed. So now the greatest advantage is once you have transformed to real lines, I can do all the operations itself. Okay, that is a beauty you see of this the random variable. So now here so we can plot this actual. Okay, so there's a probability this quantity. If I try to plot here, I can plot these numbers also. So my sample space is how much once it has been transformed to real line? Initially, it was head and tail only, but once you have transformed to real lines, what is the sample space?
Minus infinity plus.
Minus infinity to plus infinity. Okay, so now for 0, so this is half up to 1 say. Okay, then suddenly it increases to 1 and it remains you followed right the constant actually. So now so that this is the advantage. So this quantity say that is a probability x capital X less than or equal to small x. So this we call as probability distribution function. So now what is the sample space for coin tossing problem? Once you have transformed to random variables, what is its sample space?
Minus infinity.
Minus infinity plus.
Originally?
Head and tail.
Now die throwing problem, originally what is the this one sample space?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But once you have transformed to real lines, then now let us say I transform this also 1 to 1 only, 2 to 2 only, 3 to 3 only, 4 to 4 only, 5 to 5 only, then 6 to 6 only say. Now what happened? Now what is the sample space? Of course I can do any transformation I like. It is a non-unique. I can transform 1 to 10, 20, 30, 40 also I can do any whatever way we can like. Now once you have transformed to real line, what is the sample space for a die throwing problem?
Minus infinity plus.
Compressive strength of concrete anyway it is already a positive quantity. Compressive strength of concrete also what is the sample space?
Minus infinity plus.
Everything becomes minus infinity to plus infinity, minus infinity to plus infinity. So what advantage you have when everything is transformed to minus infinity to infinity? So you have the greatest advantage actually followed. So you can compare things, you can do all mathematics, like you see these subsets you can generate through these operators less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, this is a very nice you followed right. You get this type of the number. That is the greatest advantage of random variable. So the random variable is not random. Okay, it is just a transformation, and the beauty of random variable is whatever may be your sample space, but finally it transforms everything to minus infinity to infinity, so that all mathematical operations can be used. That is a main advantage which any of you should remember. Okay, now the probability density function is like this: x less than or equal to x we call as a probability distribution function. It looks like this. Now for die throwing problems, what is the probability distribution function? Let us say 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are the numbers. And I have transformed 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, 5 to 5, besides 6. Now what is the probability of x less than or equal to 0? These transformations. No. X less than or equal to 0 is null set. Probability is 0 only. Okay. And now x less than or equal to minus 1. Sorry, 1. What happens?
1 by 6.
1 by 6.
1 by
Okay. Probability is 1 by 6. So suddenly you follow it 1 by 6. Then 2 remains constant. Then one more 1 by 6. Then 2 by 6 you followed, right? 3 by 6, 4 by 6, 5 by 6. And finally everything has to collapse to
1.
1. Okay, so like this it happens actually. So this is the probability distribution function for die throwing problem kind of a thing. So like this, you can have now the people also define is a discrete and continuous random variable also. So discrete means you have a steps. Okay, the definition is like this. If the probability distribution function looks like a step function, say like this kind of a thing, then we call as a discrete thing. Continuous means the distribution function, say something you followed it like this, very smooth curve, say. So this we call as the distribution, the continuous random variable. So continuous random variable means whose probability distribution function is smooth actually. The probability distribution function is steps kind of thing, say, then we call it as a discrete, the random variable. Now in probability theories, apart from distribution function, we also use a probability density function also. What is meant by density function? Now, what is the relationship between density and distribution? Now, you are hearing for the first time, you would have studied, right? Density. It is indicated with small p. Distribution function is indicated with capital P. You followed. This is nothing but the derivative of distribution function actually. So this we call as the density function actually. So why do we require this derivative? See, like distribution functions, if you see for die throwing problem or coin tossing problems, how it is looking like. So this graph, if you see, say, what is that? What is that you are observing?
Discrete.
It is discrete only, but what is the pattern? Always it is
Constant.
Step.
The slope is
constant.
constant.
Not how it is looking like this function. Always it is a non-decreasing function, we say. You followed, right? As x is increasing, say it is a non-decreasing function, but every time it starts with 0 and goes to 1 itself, all like this only. So if you always it is increasing function, say. See, generally, in our of course you would have seen also, if there are some minor, so suppose if you plot normal distribution, log normal, some two distributions, say, okay, all their densities will be like this only. This is one density distribution function. Other also it is like this actual, okay, something like this, say. Now if you want to observe the differences between these two curves, you identify the differences between these two curves in the distribution function?
No, sir.
You can. So if you want to observe these minor differences, what is that you have to do? See, I have a function like this in mathematics. So it is something like this, a function like this. You followed, right? It is appearing very smooth. But here you can see some small, the variations are there. If I want to capture these variations, say, what is that I have to do?
Differentiate.
You have to
Differentiate at that point.
differentiate the function. Okay, so if you differentiate, what happens, the small things get zoomed up and you can see all the nice properties. So that is why you see the probability density function is widely used actually, not the distribution, but both are same only. One is a derivative, other one is if you want, you integrate and then you get it. But visually, your human eyes, they can catch nicely the probability, the density function. And of course the properties of probability density function are the distribution function, it goes from 0 to 1. So obviously the area under the probability density, say, that is a small PDF actually, is 1. And it is non-negative. Why it is non-negative? The derivative is non-negative because your distribution function is always
Increasing.
Not increasing,
Non-decreasing.
non-decreasing, we say. Okay, since it is a non-decreasing, say, so the area, the probability density function will never be, negative kind of a thing, and the area under the curve is equal to 1 because maximum value is you followed it, this, the 1 itself. So this is how we do. So what we do in probability theory is, the original theory is sample space, event space, probability. So this is the probability, the original probability definition. Now instead of using this one, say, what we try to do is, the sample space has been mapped to real lines, say. So that is a capital X, this is a random variable, and you define probability distribution function or, okay, density function actually. So this is the transformation. So what we do in probability theory is, so we don't talk in terms of sample space, event space, and probability. So what we do is we talk in terms of a random variable and the distribution function or density function. The main advantage you see of doing this random variable business is, the sample space, always all problems, so it is minus infinity to plus infinity. That is the greatest advantage, so mathematical operators can be used also. Sometimes in probability theory, the other alternative is, instead of talking in terms of the distribution density, say, people also use what is another way? What's the other way? Instead of talking in terms of density distribution, we use another way also. What is those things? You have heard this word, movements. Movements of random variable, we say. You followed. So they are nothing but expectation operators, we say. You followed. Pn of x, sorry, px of x is dx. These are the movements. Central movements also we define. You followed. So we do like this also. Px of x, the movements also we try to write actual. Okay, so like this also we try to do. The first movement is, now what is the first movement here? X into px of x. What is the first movement?
Mean.
Mean value, standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis, third movement, fourth movement, like that also, we use actual. Okay, central movements, if you see, the first movement will be 0, the first central movement. Second central movement is related to your variance or something like that. So like this also, people use it in practice actually. Okay, this way or that way also. So this is same thing, only we are doing distribution or density or the movement. So here same as in our engineering, you see. In our engineering, what do you do? If you have a rectangular cross section or circular cross sections, what do we do? How do you describe cross sections? What do we do? Cross sections. How do we define our engineering? You write the equation of this one for rectangle, circle, or something. What do we do? We write, what is the easiest way to describe a rectangle, circle, circle? See, in mechanics, what do we do? Beam of circular cross section. You write the equation of circle, x square plus y square is equal to r square. Or what do we do? What is the definition of circular cross section to us?
Radius.
So radius is fine, but essentially in our design calculations, what is that? How the cross sections comes into picture? One is area. You followed, right? P by area. So we describe all these shapes by their area. Other thing is
Moment of inertia.
moment of inertia. So like that we define. So these are all nothing but movements only. You followed. So we don't write equation of channel section, say in steel tables. If you see channel section or angle section, we don't write any equation describing the angle section or something. The easiest way is you find out its area, moment of inertia, this side, that side, you followed like the description. So same thing in probability theory also, like for normal distribution, say. So this is my probability density function, say. Instead of talking in terms of density function, I will talk in terms of movements actually. That is, mean value, standard deviation, like there are more or less same as moment of inertia and other, the things itself. Okay. So fine. So I will stop here. We will continue in the tomorrow's class itself. So if you have any questions, you can ask.